Rome had already beaten Carthage once. It had taken land, demanded money, and left its enemy humiliated. Then Hannibal crossed the Alps, entered Italy with a battered army, and began doing something Rome did not believe was possible. He started destroying Roman armies on Roman soil. This video was made possible by Incogni. Use code OverSimplified through the link below for an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan. Also, make sure you grab the Roman Consul U2s before it is too late. Do not make me mention it again. Now, back to Hannibal Rome and the moment the Second Punic War became a nightmare. Hannibal's army had survived the famous crossing of the Alps. That sentence sounds heroic, but survival was about the best word for it. His men had frozen starved, slipped from icy cliffs, fought mountain tribes, lost supplies, and staggered down into Italy with only a fraction of the force that had left Spain. But they were there, and that was enough to shake Rome. The Roman consul Scipio reacted fast. Hannibal had entered the Roman homeland, and Scipio was not going to let him wander around unchallenged. In typical Roman style, he marched directly toward the enemy. Hannibal prepared for his first battle against Rome on Italian soil. Before the fighting began, he wanted to make sure his men understood their situation. So he staged a brutal contest between captured Celtic prisoners. They were made to fight to the death, and the winner would receive prizes and freedom. Then Hannibal explained the lesson. Those prisoners were like his soldiers. They were trapped in Italy. There was no easy escape. If they wanted to live, they had to fight. If they wanted reward, they had to win. It was a dark message. But Hannibal was not leading a comfortable campaign. He was deep in enemy territory. His army had no safe retreat. Victory was not just ambition now. It was survival. He also sacrificed a goat for inspiration, because apparently ancient leadership sometimes meant motivational speeches and livestock violence. Scipio chose the more traditional method. He gave his men a rousing speech. To the Romans, Hannibal's army looked weak. The Alps had starved and broken it. Rome was the strongest military power in the region. The Romans expected an easy victory. They believed they were facing tired survivors, not a commander about to rewrite the rules of the war. Then came the Battle of Ticinus. It ended almost as soon as it began. The Romans ran into Hannibal's fast Numidian cavalry, one of the most dangerous parts of his army. The Numidians moved with speed, flexibility, and precision. They helped create the kind of double envelopment tactics that Hannibal would become famous for. Scipio was wounded in the chaos. According to some ancient writers, his 17-year-old son, Scipio, the younger, saw his father in danger and saved him. That young man would matter much more later. For now, the Roman army fled. They destroyed the bridge behind them as they retreated. This was humiliating. Rome had entered the battle expecting to sweep away a weakened invader. Instead, the invader had sent them running. And someone else noticed: the Celts. Hannibal had hoped the Celtic tribes of northern Italy would join him. Many of them had recently been conquered by Rome and hated Roman rule. But they needed proof that Hannibal was worth backing. Ticinus gave them that proof. After the Roman defeat, Celts began moving to Hannibal's side. Even Celtic troops serving in the Roman camp started to reconsider their loyalty. Some deserted and brought Hannibal a horrifying gift: Roman heads. For Rome, this was more than a military embarrassment. Hannibal was not only beating Roman forces, he was pulling Rome's local enemies toward him. Ticinus had been a small battle compared with what was coming, but its psychological effect was huge. It showed that Hannibal was dangerous. It showed that the Celts might turn. And it showed that Rome had badly underestimated the man now loose in Italy. But the Senate still made excuses. They said the defeat was because of treacherous Celts. They said it had only been a cavalry fight. They said Hannibal had not yet faced the full strength of the Roman legions. And besides, Rome still had another consul. That consul was Longus. Longus had been in the south preparing to invade Africa. He had already seen some success, including the capture of Malta. But when news arrived that Hannibal was in Italy, everything changed. Longus was ordered home. He did not like it. He had expected to be the man who invaded Carthage and won the war. Instead, he had to return north and help deal with Hannibal. After the long journey, Longus joined forces with Scipio, creating a double consular army. That sounded powerful. In reality, it created a problem. The two consuls did not agree. Scipio had already fought Hannibal and had been wounded. He had seen the danger up close. He wanted caution. He believed the army should train through the winter and fight later when conditions were better. Longus wanted action. He was aggressive, impatient, and eager for glory. To him, caution looked like weakness. He wanted to march at Hannibal and crush him. Roman command made this tension worse. When two consuls combined their armies, they often took turns holding command. One consul led one day, the other led the next. If both men agreed, that system could work. If they disagreed, it could become absurd. And Hannibal knew it. He had spies in the Roman camp. He understood the Roman system. He understood Longus's temper, and he understood how to turn all of that into a trap. But before we get to that trap, let's talk about data brokers. They collect personal information, sell it to third parties, and suddenly strangers know far too much about you. Incogni helps remove your data from these brokers by contacting them on your behalf. Instead of spending years trying to do it yourself, you can let Incogni handle the process and keep working continuously to protect your information. Go to incogni.com/oversimplified and use code OverSimplified for 60% off an annual plan. And as always, you will be supporting the channel, so thank you. Now, back to Roman heads, angry consuls, and one very carefully prepared disaster. Hannibal needed another victory. His position in Italy depended on momentum. If he kept beating Rome, the Celts would keep supporting him. If he stalled, their loyalty might fade. So, Hannibal wanted battle. The combined Roman force may have outnumbered him. That meant he needed more than courage. He needed control. So he prepared the field, the timing, the conditions, and the psychology of his enemy. The key was Longus. Hannibal made sure to spring his trap while Longus was in command. The night before the battle, Hannibal let his army rest early. His men slept. They prepared. They would go into the next day fed, rested, and ready. Then, before dawn, Hannibal sent his Numidian cavalry toward the Roman camp. Their job was simple: provoke Longus. They arrived in the cold darkness and began harassing the Romans. Longus took the bait immediately. Scipio warned him that this was obviously a lure. But Longus was exactly the kind of man Hannibal expected him to be. He ordered the army out. The Roman soldiers were forced to leave camp in a hurry. They had not eaten breakfast. They were cold, tired, and rushing into battle before the day had even properly begun. The Numidians withdrew, drawing the Romans after them. Then the Romans reached the Trebia River. It was freezing. Longus ordered his men through it anyway. The soldiers crossed the cold water, shivering and hungry, then continued toward Hannibal's camp. Meanwhile, the Carthaginians were waking after a full night of rest. They had eaten. They had prepared. They rubbed themselves with oil to help protect against the cold. When the Romans finally arrived, Hannibal's men were ready. The Romans were not. Hannibal had arranged the battle so that his enemy was tired, unfed, frozen, and angry, while his own soldiers were rested, fed, and waiting. Then he added the final piece. The night before, Hannibal had sent an elite force under his brother to hide nearby. When the battle began and the Romans were locked in combat, this hidden force emerged and struck from behind. The exhausted Romans were surrounded and cut apart. Once again, Hannibal's cavalry and envelopment tactics devastated the Roman army. But Trebia was not just about cavalry. It was about control. Hannibal used spies, terrain, weather timing, and enemy personality. He created many small advantages, stacked them together, and turned them into a crushing victory. Longus escaped with a smaller group of troops, but the damage had been done. Tens of thousands of Romans were missing, dead or scattered. Trebia was a disaster, and Rome did not immediately receive the full truth, because Longus tried to obscure what had happened. His consulship was ending, and he had little interest in returning to Rome as the man who had led a huge army into Hannibal's trap. But the truth could not stay hidden forever. The Romans had been beaten again, even worse. More Celts now joined Hannibal. Rome's control over Cisalpine Gaul began to collapse. Hannibal had entered Italy with a weakened army in only a short time. He had defeated Roman forces twice and gained new allies in Rome's own backyard. Rome's confidence began turning into alarm. The original Roman plan for the war had been simple: invade Carthage, contain Hannibal in Spain, and finish the conflict on Roman terms. Hannibal had destroyed that plan completely. Now Rome was not invading Carthage. Rome was defending Italy. The Senate responded by raising 11 new legions. The scale of the danger was finally becoming clear. Scipio and Longus finished their terms as consuls and were replaced by two new men, Servilius and Flaminius. Hannibal had also learned something important. Winning battles was not enough. He needed to keep the Celts loyal, and Celtic loyalty was not something to take for granted. He treated captured Celts who had fought for Rome extremely well and let them return home. That helped his image. But he also knew that if his army stayed too long in their lands, eating their food and draining their resources, resentment would grow. The Celts wanted plunder. They wanted movement. They wanted to go south into richer Roman territory. Hannibal also wanted to move south because he hoped to break Rome's alliances with other Italian peoples. If he could convince Rome's allies to abandon it, he could isolate the city without needing to storm it directly. So the next move was obvious. Hannibal had to go south. But Rome had expected that. There were two main routes, and the new Roman consuls had taken fortified positions blocking them. If Hannibal attacked directly, he would be fighting at a disadvantage and could be trapped. So Hannibal looked for another route. There was one. It went through the Arno marshes. This was not a normal road. It was flooded, filthy, diseased, and miserable. The water could rise up to the neck. The ground was mud. There was nowhere to sleep, nowhere to sit, and almost no way to move without suffering. For most commanders, that would have made the route impossible. For Hannibal, impossible routes were starting to look like a habit. He took the army into the marshes. The march lasted 4 days and became another nightmare. The men went without proper sleep. They slogged through mud and dirty water. Disease spread. Animals collapsed. When pack animals died, men could rest on them briefly before being forced forward again. The soldiers were exhausted, filthy, and half delirious. Hannibal suffered too. During the march, he developed a terrible eye infection. With no clean water to treat it, the damage became severe, and he may have lost sight in one eye. But when Hannibal finally emerged from the marshes, he had done it again. He had slipped a huge army past the Romans. He entered the rich lands of Etruria, where his men could resupply and his Celtic allies could plunder. Fields burned. Villages suffered. Roman territory was being ravaged in plain sight, and one of the new consuls could not stand it. That consul was Flaminius.